Good evening, I'm Jose Cardenas. It's been 5 years since SB 1070 was signed into legislation. We'll talk about how one of the nation's toughest immigration laws has affected Arizona, and where you can see an exhibition exploring the human experience of crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. All this coming up next on Horizonte.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station.
Thank you for joining us. 5 years ago, former Governor Jan Brewer signed SB 1070 into law, which allowed law enforcement agencies to either detain or arrest a person under quote-unquote reasonable suspicion that they were in the United States illegally. It was known as the quote, show me your papers, unquote provision. However, much of the law has been overturned by the federal courts. Joining me to talk about the law and what has happened in Arizona 5 years later is ASU law professor Paul Bender and Daniel Gonzalez, reporter for the Arizona Republic. Thank you both for joining us on Horizonte. Daniel, it doesn't seem like it was just 5 years ago because it seems almost a decade ago. But things were pretty intense, and there were protests, there were demonstrations. Nobody knew whether Governor Brewer was going to sign the law or anything. Paint the picture for us as to what was happening in Arizona at that time.
Well, you're right, Jose. This was an incredible, extraordinary time in Arizona's history, and it was really many years in the making. You can remember back in going back all the way to 2001, 2002, incrementally the state started past these laws that were tougher and tougher immigration enforcement laws. At the time, Arizona had one of the largest undocumented populations proportionally of any state in the United States. And there was a lot of things happening at the border. There was a lot of smuggling going on. There was a lot of demographic changes taking place. And the legislature had decided immigration reform had failed in Congress. And there was this feeling in the legislature that they were going to take matters into their own hands and try to pass this very, very tough immigration enforcement law.
And this is something that Russell Pierce, the principal architect, had tried several times before, and it never happened. And then he broke through the logjam.
He broke through the logjam, and then there was a lot of suspense of whether Governor Brewer would sign it. Remember, she was getting ready to run for re-election, and there was a large pack of Republicans running for office, and she signed the law, and it propelled her into the forefront. And then it really...
There were a lot of people who thought she wasn't even going to get out of the primary.
Right.
And then she did that, and then she was very successful in the general.
But what was really extraordinary was what it unleashed in the Latino community, especially in the undocumented community here in Arizona, where there was just real palpable fear that people would be walking down the street. And I remember hearing this over and over again from immigrants that I interviewed. And there was this real palpable fear that they'd be just walking down the street or driving their car, and the police were going to be driving around the state looking specifically for anyone who looked Hispanic, pulling them over for the express purpose of trying to find illegal immigrants to deport. And it unleashed this huge panic. And I remember in the weeks that followed, Governor Brewer signed an SB 1070, and you could drive through the neighborhoods on the west side, and there were yard sales everywhere, dozens and dozens of yard sales of people just preparing to leave the state because they were so terrified. And remember, this was also a time when the Great Recession was really in full gear, and lots of people were losing their jobs, and jobs were scarce. They were being laid off, and people were feeling, my work situation is unsteady, and there's also a chance that I could be rounded up tomorrow and deported and not make it home to my children. And one of the things that we did that in the weeks that after Governor Brewer signed it was we went out and found a family that actually was moving, and they picked up stakes. They had lived here, I think, for 15 years, and they moved all the way to Pennsylvania. We actually drove with them in that entire route. And I remember they were so scared of being pulled over. They left in June. They were so scared of being pulled over that they left. They waited all day, and they waited till the nightfall, and they left at night thinking that would give them the safest chance to get out of the state and make it to Pennsylvania.
So, Paul, a lot of anxiety in the population at large, certainly the immigrant population, about what the law could do. We mentioned briefly in the introduction one of the provisions about the show me your papers, but there was also concern about the provision that made it a crime to transport someone who was in the country without proper documentation. And even some of the defenders of the law hesitated to say what that might mean. There was a lot of ambiguity whether it could mean, and the example that was used was the child of an undocumented immigrant going to jail for driving grandma to church.
Yeah, I think what happened was the Supreme Court put a brake on what the legislature of Arizona was trying to do. The legislature of Arizona, and a lot of people in Arizona, thought the federal government's not doing its job enforcing immigration law, so we're going to take over doing it. And the Supreme Court held in the case that that was unconstitutional, that immigration was something that was a federal responsibility, and the states could not take it on their own to enforce immigration law. If they did that, they would have to do it under the supervision of the federal government. So a number of the provisions of SB 1070 were then clearly unconstitutional because it was the states saying, we're going to enforce immigration law. And people thought that, why shouldn't the states be able to do that since they're enforcing federal law? And the court answered, no, enforcing federal law means the federal government has to decide how it should be enforced. They have a lot of discretion, who to enforce it against, what kind of penalties to provide, and that's all got to be under the direction of the federal government. And so most of 1070, and I think the wave of anti-immigrant legislation stopped for a while because the Supreme Court said you can't do that. The one provision it left in place was the show me your papers provision. And the opinion is not altogether clear, but it basically says you can ask people who you arrest for a non-immigration crime or stop for a non-immigration crime to validate, to show that they're legally in the country. You can ask that, but you can't detain them because you think they're illegal. You can ask them for information and you can tell the federal government that you have this person who may be an illegal immigrant, but that's all you can do. You can't, you being the state police, cannot hold somebody because they think he might be violating immigration law.
Paul, how much of a surprise was it, though, that this court, the Supreme Court, reached the decision it did? Because when they decided to grant review of the Ninth Circuit's decision, which was pretty much in favor of the people challenging the law, people thought, okay, well, this court, given the makeup of this court, they're going to come out and support the law.
I think there was surprise. I think there was a feeling, and because the court had decided some other immigration-related cases, some coming from Arizona, where they sided with the state, and I think there was a feeling that, hey, they're going to uphold this law, but they didn't. They really struck the whole thing down because the only part they left was a part that doesn't give the state any independent responsibility to enforce immigration law. And they made it absolutely clear that the state could not do that on its own. It could only do it under the supervision of the federal government.
Daniel, SB 1070 never really got into effect, most of it, and in even the part that was upheld, there was an injunction temporarily putting it on hold until it went through the court system. But there was a lot of turmoil. You had the boycotts. You had attempts to enact further restrictive legislation, and yet people think it was the high water mark of the anti-immigrant movement.
Well, in a lot of ways, it really was the high water mark because in the year that followed, there was additional immigration enforcement legislation. They tried to keep pushing this agenda. You recall the business community rose up. I remember there was a full-page ad that was taken out in the Arizona Republic condemning this kind of legislation and asking the legislature to move on. Those bills did not go forward. And in the years since SB 1070, we've seen fewer and fewer immigration enforcement bills come through the legislature or even be proposed in the legislature. None have been passed. And then this year, I'm pretty sure that there was not a single immigration enforcement piece of legislation put forward. So I think in a lot of ways, Arizona has kind of moved past this issue. You don't hear the kinds of rhetoric that we were hearing. In the Dreamers issue and the driver's license issue, we saw that Governor Brewer really still dug in her heels until the very last day of office, trying to deny Dreamers to get driver's licenses if they had the deferred action. But under the new Governor Ducey, we haven't heard the same kind of rhetoric. We haven't heard him coming out in favor of Dreamers. We haven't seen him pushing to allow Dreamers to get driver's license. But on the other hand, we haven't heard him saying the same kind of rhetoric. So it really represented the high water mark. We've seen quite a change since then.
Paul, what about on the legal front? You have the person who's widely credited as kind of the legal author of SB 1070. I think right now he's the Attorney General of the state of Kansas. You had other
What's
states.
his name?
Well, and other
Kobach,
states.
I think.
Yes,
Yeah,
Kobach. And Alabama tried its hand at this, didn't get too far. Do you think the steam has gone out of these kinds of efforts, or is it just a temporary pause and it's going to come back?
It seems to me the steam has gone out of it, and I think it's largely because the Supreme Court was so clear about the fact that states just could not do that. They couldn't decide, hey, the federal government's not doing its job, so we'll do it for them. And I think, and the other thing that's happened, I think, is a lot of interest and attention has been focused on President Obama's decision to sort of regularize the place here of some people who undocumented, but who've been here for a period of time, and who have kids here, who were born here, who are citizens. And I think the anti-immigration feeling, a lot of that has been diverted to blaming Obama for doing that. And so it's become more of a thing of an anti-Obama thing, and that's taken some of the anti-immigrant character out of it.
Well, it's been 5 years. It's been a tumultuous 5 years, but we're done for now. We'll see what happens in the next legislature, perhaps. We'll see what happens in the elections. And thank you both for joining us on Horizonte to talk about that.
Thank you.
Fiesta Mexicana Dance Company has been in the Valley for more than 15 years. It was formed to preserve and promote Mexican dance traditions. In Sounds of Cultura, SOC producer Yahaira Jaquez and videographer Juan Magaña show you what it's like to be part of the company.
Our dance company is called Fiesta Mexicana Dance Company.
It's helped me a lot, drastically.
We have dances from all over Mexico, and every region is different and has their own unique style in the footwork, in the costumes. And then of course we have all the Latin American countries. We have Central America and we have South America. We want to educate our community and our audiences and say that, wow, if we see influences of Africa or Asia, and then the community sees, well, you know what, there's more to the Hispanic culture than what we usually think. We try to be as professional as possible so that when our artists are on stage, you can attract attention and say, wow, this is in our community. These are kids that are our neighbors, that are going to our schools. They're doing something very positive in the community. They're showing a part of a culture that maybe we don't know and we don't understand. Different generations that have been here many years, still that's part of their culture. And they want to make sure that their kids continue and learn about their culture so that they don't lose touch with where they're from.
This whole experience has changed my eyes from my perspectives and everything, and I really am proud from where I come from and all.
We're also a nonprofit organization, and so we don't ever close a door to anyone who really wants to be a part of this. A lot of the dance schools in the Valley are very expensive, so this gives everyone a chance to be a part of something and try it at least. And if they see that it's not for them, but at least they tried something that maybe they normally would not have had the chance to do. When you dedicate yourself fully, it's a lot of work. And some parents sometimes get frustrated because they think, oh no, you know, practice every day, and then we have performances every weekend. It's tough. It's tough on families. But as time goes on and they see how their kids change, maybe they're more outgoing, they're not as afraid, they're not as shy, they're not as timid, they realize that it is something very special in their kids.
It's hard work. Like, I've done a lot of stuff, and this is like one of the most hardest things I've done.
I think that we can find out, you know, through dance, that we have much more in common than what we realize.
State of Exception is an exhibition that presents traces of the human experience, such as water bottles, backpacks, and other objects left behind in the desert by both law enforcement agents who look to keep them out and undocumented migrants on their journey into the U.S. Here with me to talk about this exhibition is Richard Barnes, artist and photographer, and Amanda Krugliak, artist and curator. Thank you both for joining us on Horizonte.
Thank you.
Amanda, give us the background of how this came to be. It started in Michigan, right?
That's right. I'm an artist and a curator for the University of Michigan Institute for the Humanities. And Jason DeLeon is an anthropologist there who for the last 5-6 years has been collecting objects left in the desert by undocumented migrants.
You're talking about the Arizona desert.
That's right.
Why would that be of interest to people in Michigan?
Well, let's just say as a curator for an institute that thinks about affecting change through art and humanities and research, that was a really compelling project to think about for us to support. Jason's interest as an anthropologist is thinking about these objects and what they can tell us about this migration as a scientist or as a researcher. I had worked with Richard Barnes as a visiting artist at the Institute, and he has a vast experience with collections, again, and objects and how we think about objects and what stories they tell. And so I called him up and I said, would you work with me on this project, conceptually thinking about how we might represent Jason DeLeon's research and these objects, and what taking that into a gallery situation might do.
And this was several years ago?
This was now 4
Right,
years ago that we began this conversation.
And Richard, what's the significance of the title, State of Exception?
State of Exception comes from a social thinker, philosopher, Antonio Gamba, Italian. It represents this place of limbo, this place of an in-between state. And it's a political designation. But as artists, we're looking at it in a much more ambiguous way. We're not so interested in the politics, even though you cannot escape that. There's no way. We're interested in interpreting this work and creating awareness around the objects that have been collected by Jason and his crew.
Amanda, the objects and the people, right? I mean,
That's
that's
right.
part of the title, it really.
Well,
it's
right,
meaning.
because in the same way that this is this, political designation, it also refers to this exceptional journey and exceptional people taking this journey. And it seemed to us that by presenting this work and assigning value to it also in an exhibition, that you would be engaging with something very real. That from these objects, of course, then we would be talking about a human story. You couldn't really distance yourself from the engagement with the object. And so, of course, then it becomes about a human experience and something that you can relate to, much like your own life, your own backpack, your own bottle, your own child, and their belongings and their dress-up shoe. So I think that's really where for us there was this resonance. What could these objects do? How could engaging with them accomplish something else? What could we think about in terms of how we value something that otherwise one might think should be discarded?
And Richard, I want to put a picture up on the screen of what I think is kind of the signature piece for this exhibition, which is the collection of these objects. What are we looking at here?
This is 500 backpacks that have been collected by Jason and his crew as migrants cross the border. They carry a set of clothes to change into. These backpacks they're the containers for their set of clothes. What they do is they leave the backpacks in the desert and try to blend in by changing to this new set of clothes when they come across the border. So these backpacks, which Jason and his crew has found the most of, represent kind of the life, the belongings, the essential elements when migrants make the journey across the border.
And what were you as an artist trying to communicate with this arrangement?
Well, we thought that backpacks are, it becomes part of the body. It takes on the back side of your human existence, so to speak. And we really felt that was symbolic. Simple objects, as Amanda said, nothing fetishized. Certainly there are rosaries, there are other objects that are very significant, but we felt it was the everyday objects that were really important, and that becomes the major part of this exhibition, is this wall of backpacks.
And it almost references to the human body, the backpack itself, what it's, the shape of it. It seems to mimic this this burden or what one carries or what one leaves behind, and the intricacy of all of that, the diversity of these stories. Backpacks that seem to have belonged to children, backpacks with American sports logos, a whole range of backpacks that tell you this is everybody like all of us, right? This is a really diverse story, and we don't know, this isn't one kind of person or one kind of experience.
It's a global situation as well, when we have what's happening in the Mediterranean right now, what's happening on the Turkish-Syrian border right now. This is being played out across the world.
And the exhibition itself consists of this kind of three-dimensional representation, but you also have some still photographs, some videos. One of them that I found quite striking is a picture of a tree with a carving, and we've got it up on the screen now. It says American.
Right. As far as we know, that was carved by a migrant, because they found underneath it a set of clothes that had been laid out, neatly laid out. And perhaps this migrant had to bolt, had to run off because immigration was coming. I don't know. He left behind this set of clothes. So we're not exactly sure who did this, but we're quite sure that it was a migrant.
And I want to put the last picture we have up on the screen, because I want to make sure we talk about it before we run out of time. But this is the border we're talking about.
This is the border. This is the border that separates Nogales, Mexico from Nogales, U.S.
So Amanda, and people in Michigan, and the reason we're talking about this is because this exhibition is coming to Arizona.
Yeah.
But people in Michigan, what was their reaction?
It was in some ways, it was complicated. I think that it made something real in a place that you could feel like you're far away from something, when in fact our communities there are, we have a significant Hispanic community. There are certainly people there who are undocumented, part of our town.
Did you have people who said, "I crossed that border myself"?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a book, and then people would write their feelings in this book, and it would be everything from, how could you do this? This was worth nothing, to thank you so much. This really makes me feel like I can now talk to my children about this experience and about our family and about our history. And I think it forced people to have different feelings, different experiences, and I guess that in the end is what we wanted. Something that wasn't static. It's not meant to just sit on a shelf or be one version of something. It was really meant to have all of these different responses and room for these responses, I guess.
And Richard, you and I talked a little bit off camera about one of the things that you wanted to communicate to people, which is that people are dying crossing that desert. Right. Is that something that I think people in Arizona appreciate that? They may have different reactions to immigration questions itself. Was it a surprise to people in Michigan?
I think it was a surprise to people in Michigan. I think it was a surprise to people in New York, where I'm from, where I currently live. Yeah, I think this issue here, that's why we're very excited to bring this exhibition to Phoenix, to Arizona, because we feel like it's important that people see this. Even though you're living it day to day, we're looking at it in, I think, a much different way. We are artists responding to it. We cannot deny the politics, but at the same time, we feel if people are dying in the desert because of policies, governmental policies, because of failed states further south, that is a moral issue and needs to be addressed. And that's how we're addressing it, is through this exhibition.
Amanda, any apprehensiveness, any trepidation about putting this on display here in Arizona?
I guess I don't know quite what to expect, but I feel like the project has always seemed to organically lead us from one thing to another. And I feel we've all become so invested in it, as well as being important to do and to take different places, and it means something different each place we take it. So I guess not really, in the sense that I look forward to knowing that it's meant something else to each part of the United States that we end up taking it to. What is it doing?
Richard, we're almost out of time. We've got a little less than a minute left. What do you expect people to think of when Arizonans, when they see this? What are your hopes? What are your expectations?
I think there will be controversy. I think there will be people who will be, what does this detritus, what does this garbage mean Why should I be interested in it? Why should I be interested in people who are illegally crossing to the States when maybe my relatives came here legally? I think that will bring up questions. And finally, that's what this exhibition is about. It's about asking more questions than it answers.
Well, we'll see how many questions we get after it runs through August, right? Or the beginning of August.
Yeah.
Thank you both for joining us on Horizonte to talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is our show for tonight from all of us here at 8 and Horizonte. Thank you for watching. I'm Jose Cardenas. Have a good evening.
Funding for Horizonte is made possible by contributions by the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station.